Today we're making a fishtail ring. Then grabbed the chasing hammer and made everything flat. It's simple and effective, and I love that in my jewelry. And I know that I will have centered soldering. And it's so shiny and pretty. Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're making a fishtail ring, which is such a classical choice when it comes to rings, and it's very complementing style. You can use that for stacking rings, which I will show you later on the channel as well. The only thing to nail here is just the sizing, because when it comes to fishtail ring, sizing could be a bit off. When we're bending something to create the shape, we're losing the size as well. So you have to keep aware of that. Sometimes I even lose two sizes. It depends how deep I want my fishtail would be. I will show you my way how I'm doing that. And I think it's the easiest way how to create it as well. And you can use it in various design of yours. When it comes to earrings, rings, we can create split shank, which I will show you today as well. If you have a good base when it comes to split shank rings, when it comes to fishtail rings, if you know how to do it, you can get creative pretty easily, because it's just your choice how you want to fill that split shank. I'm giving you the base, I'm giving you the size and thickness as always. Today's video is sponsored by Rio Grande. It's a huge jewelry supply store where you can find everything you might need for your jewelry making, from supplies, tools, silver. So thank you, Rio Grande, for sponsoring this video. Yeah, I think we have to start this. And we're starting everything with 0.45 millimeter thickness of a D-shaped wire. As I mentioned, sizing with fishtail rings is very tricky, so you have to make a sample for yourself. My fishtail was quite deep, so I lost two sizes. So if I want to make size 7, I would choose to make size 9, and then I will get size 7. And when you're wrapping around a mandrel like this, just keep it very tight. It's the only suggestion I would give you, because then we will have an even size all the time. It will be easy to cut as well, because small bending or imperfection can give you a slightly different size, and we want both rings would be the same size. Metal is quite thick. Probably I would suggest myself to take a better saw blade for this thickness, even though usually I tend to go to have more teeth, let's say 4 teeth and a contact when it comes to cutting, because it gives me a bit smoother cut. I just found it works for me better, so everybody's custom. When you take advice, always think about customizing for your own needs. Our cutting is different, our strength is different, so make sure you customize that for yourself. Now we're marking the placement where we want to cut that open. If we want to have even sides, always make sure you're measuring how far you're going from your center. So I was choosing 4 millimeters and dragging line like that, just to have that deep fishtail. If you want that fishtail would be smaller, less deep, just choose less of millimeters that you're cutting off. It will be more closed and you won't get that deep fishtail. Sharp corners are the key in fishtail rings, so always make sure you're not cutting too close. Like I showed you, I was even twisting a ring just to adjust my cutting space. When we have both rings cut out, we're going to anneal them. I was making that D-shaped wire myself, so it got hardened through the process and even that wrapping around as well. So I had to anneal just to have that softer bending when it comes to metal. Usually annealing is the most important part when it comes to any type of metal shaping. So if you feel that you're struggling to shape your metal, just anneal it, and anneal it correctly as well. And now it's the fun part where we actually can bend and form our fishtail ring. It just truly transforms all that shape and it becomes totally different shape. And you want to do that slowly, because we don't want to disshape our ring. We want that curve would be even on both sides and not to misshape that much of a backside of our rings. We're just kind of testing our patience here because we have to move back and forth with that bending just to connect it as flush as we can. Correct it with pliers constantly and have that sound. Do you hear that sound? That's when we're starting to touch. And of course, it's very hard to connect that. It would be very flush. So for that, we're coming with the saw and just cutting that through just to have that flush connection. And we might have to repeat that a few times just to have as flush as we can. And when we achieve that beautiful connection, we can go and solder. This time I'm creating a ball out of my solder because for me it's easier to solder that way. It's not that easy when you begin to solder. I was constantly using just chips, but to solder with balls in some occasions is way easier than to solder with chips. I was practicing that quite a lot just to, make that happen. And now we have to actually form the ring because it was like all over the place after that bending. So we need to have a comfortable those two beautiful rings with the ring. For the future. And of course with the front as well. But the front setting wasn't that bad, I would say. We need to make sure that I love that imperfection that it has inside of the ring, that it would be round and it has a flat bottom going on. It's like a win-win here. That's, that's our job. And this job is more important because we want to create that split shank from these two fishtail rings. Try to not rush here. Try to keep those sizes equal when you're going down, just not to move your ring in some kind of cross way. Now I'm just preparing a bezel strip. For that, I'm just measuring my height of the stone and dragging the line just to create the height that I need from my bezel strip. And I always use pliers just to create corners because it's easier to do it that way. To wrap around the stone, you have to have quite soft metal. And I like to work with a bit harder metal because it keeps the shape better. So, I have to work with pliers then. Pliers making sure that we can create sharper corners as well. And to make that sharp corner happen, as you can see, I'm bending more than I have to and then coming back just to create the shape that I actually need. It will give you a sharper corner immediately. And to connect our bezel, we have to play around with pushing two sides on top of each other and coming back again just to create that tension. That's why I like to work with harder metal in this case because I don't need to work that hard to create that tension again. But if you have soft bezel, you have to play around more just to create that tension happen. The more flush you will be with your connection, the less of a chance that it will break apart when you will be setting stone. And now when we have that beautiful bezel cage, I would say, we need to create the bottom for sure. So for that, I always use new sheet because it's the flattest thing that you can get. If it means the flattest, it means the best solder connection that you can get. So I always take a new sheet and don't be bothered. I just need to make that flat bottom of my bezel, which I'm doing with wet and dry paper on a flat surface. And that shiny, even edge, it's all that I want to see, just to be sure that we are flat and we can do our soldering. In this case, we want something under because we want to reach our back plate the first when we're coming with the flame because it's the biggest part of our soldering, and if we will block it on soldering block, it won't get that hot and we won't reach the middle part. That's why we're putting something under. As you saw, I'm always warming my soldering liquid before and then putting my chips into the piece because it won't fly away randomly in this case. And the only place I'm putting my flame into is basically the bottom of the bezel, because that will be enough to heat up that upper part as well, and we will have a beautiful even connection throughout. And you want to see that wide, beautiful line inside and around your bezel, just to make sure that you did that soldering job perfectly. And now we are sewing out our bezel from the sheet because we want to prepare it to be soldered on our beautiful ring. And I do lubricate quite a lot throughout the sewing. You actually can feel that when you're getting that crispy sewing, then just put lubrication on and you will get way smoother cut. You just don't want that too much because then it will clog your sewing blade teeth. So make sure you're using just enough. Now all that wet and dry paper action quite aggressively just to take all those lines out. If the bezel is thicker, I would say start with files all the time, then go with wet and dry. It will be way quicker. And now we're coming back with a ring part. We need to make sure that we have quite flat because I want to connect them. And even you wouldn't want to connect them, you still want that would be quite flat and a straight line in the back. It will be way more comfortable to wear, that's for sure. And you know, I started with rawhide mallet, I lost the patience, then grabbed the chasing hammer and made everything flat. That's what I needed because we need a very good connection. That touching has to be on point here. I'm just marking my placement because it's easier when you are coming to a soldering station just to, you know, put them together. So in this case, I'm just putting my lines together and I know that I will have centered soldering. And when we're soldering that big of a piece and putting even 2/3 hands, we need a lot of heat, like a lot of heat. We need to make sure everything is hot before reaching our soldering point. So if you're working with a gas, you need a big torch. And now we're putting that in a pickle. Usually I always put in a pickle in every step while I'm making, but it's just the preference, the way I like to work. You don't have to always put that in a pickle, but it depends how much of oxidation you're reaching through your soldering session. If you reached quite a lot, you have to pickle it. Now we're filing places where we want to attach our bezel setting. The first thing I do, I put my ring as I wanted to see, because for me it's easier to see how my ring will be looking like. So I'm kind of attaching that first, and then I'm turning my ring and resoldering that when it's laying. And I wanted to attach small balls around my bezel just to have that a bit of a touch, you know. So I cut that from ball wire because those two balls already connected, and I just have to place it on top of my ring. If you want to solder some balls on your piece, make sure you're making that flat as well, because everything has to be flat where it's touching the surface that you want to connect. Or in other cases, you have to mimicate the shape bottom that you want to connect together. And now when everything is finally soldered, we can actually sand the whole ring and prepare that for stone setting. I like to use radial disc for that because I can reach places where I couldn't reach with my wet and dry paper mandrels. And of course we need to clean our inside of the bezel because I had extra solder there and I don't want to have it. And that's why I always clean that out. Usually I use drills because it's easier. It's like a file, but we can't reach that inside with the file. So it does the job. Then come to compounds, because even with this nylon brush, I could reach places where those radial discs couldn't reach. That's why I like to use Tripoli with harsher bristle brush. And I always make sure I polish the inside of the bezel. So I'm just switching to a smaller brush and polishing that out, that it would be decent looking. And then finish off everything with the rouge and thicker mop. I love mops. You can't reach all of the places with that, so I was switching to a bristle brush too, but mops are like so quick if you have bigger spaces to polish. And finally, we reached the last part of the video where we have to set the stone in. First of all, to secure the stone in place, which is quite secure itself because I always try to make the tightest fitting bezel as I can. So that's important if you want that stone would be easier to set. Because if you have spaces where it's not filling, it will be harder to bend that metal over because we need to bend a bit of that top part of the bezel. So first of all, I'm using bigger pusher, but I'm not going over that much because this one is quite slippery and big, so we can damage the stone. So I'm just pushing around it, not coming to the top part. When it comes to the top part, I'm going with my chasing hammer and square pusher. That's my favorite way to set the stone. I think it's the most secure way how you can set the stone, but it takes some practice as it would be with any other kind of tool, but I think it's the easiest way to nail. Have all control in your hands. And finishing everything off with the sand because it's quite soft compound and it's not ruining your stones, so yeah, it's a very nice one to use. And finally we finished all the ring and it's so shiny and pretty. And that peridot stone itself, it's looking so good. We created a beautiful peridot ring, which is looking simple and so chic at the same time. And this ring is just all about the shape and the stone. It's just such a simplicity, which looks elegant. Those pointy edges somehow always looks way more luxury and chic. I don't know why, but it truly creates that feeling for you, even though we don't have that much going on this ring. It's simple and effective, and I love that in my jewelry. So if you have questions or suggestions, leave that in the comments. It's so nice when we can reshare information, and when I get tips and advices from you, it's so good because I can try that for us all if it's new to me, or you sometimes reminding me what is going on. That's why we have this channel, that it could teach us all. So I hope this video was useful and I hope you like it, and I will see you in my next one.